Sacred geometry is the study of all the patterns that exist, because there's a pattern to everything. And the key to empowerment is understanding what the pattern is of that thing, whether it's our finances, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our health. There's always a pattern behind success or failure. And in the ancient world, they understood that these patterns also exist for understanding, who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this current incarnation? What is the purpose of us incarnating into a physical body in a physical world to begin with? As a kid, I never understood why people focus their attention on such transient things and didn't ask the most basic question about who am I and why am I here? And how do we use this current incarnation in the best way before it's all over? Ancient Egyptian temple science was a qualitative science. Today, when we think about science, we think about it being quantitative. But in the ancient world, they understood things in terms of qualities of energy. So there's an energetic aspect that comes from higher spiritual realms, higher spiritual planes to create this world that gets expressed in the powers of color and shape and angle and proportion and number sequences. All these things are a kind of divine code or divine language of this world. In the ancient world, in every ancient tradition, including ancient Egypt, they had systems of initiation where people went through certain step-by-step processes that would expand their consciousness to higher levels. So they would begin to perceive themselves as a multi-dimensional being, operating on multiple planes at the same time. They would begin to understand the way that human consciousness can be developed much, much further than it is currently, to develop abilities that we tend to think of today as magical. And the human energy system can be developed much, much further, and to do things that, again, today would be thought to be impossible in working with natural forces. And so it kind of comes back, I can paraphrase the work of Arthur C. Clarke, where he says, any sufficiently advanced form of technology that one does not understand will appear to be magic. And that's very much the way it was in ancient Egypt and these other ancient cultures. They thought about things in a completely different way than we do. And that makes, if you see things from a different perspective, it makes things that seem to be impossible possible. We need to understand some of the fundamentals of what spiritual initiation really is.
Yes.
So one aspect of this that's been almost forgotten today is that when we do anything with our consciousness or our energy, it starts to create an energy pattern in our physical body and our energy field. So whatever thoughts we keep generating, whatever their quality is, whatever energies we're generating with our heart or with our actions in the world, it's developing a pattern that then creates a type of secret geometric structure in our energy field. And so for advanced masters of this work, they could check out somebody's field and see what energy structures are present. So just as a very simple way to explain that, certain chakras in their energy field would be more activated or not very activated, or they would be balanced in a harmonious way, or they would be unbalanced, or the energy meridians and patterns in the body would be fully open or they would be blocked. All of these things are components of larger geometric patterns that can be created in the human energy field. And so this development of the consciousness and energy gets reflected in energy patterns in a person's field. And that's the pearl of great price that we can take through the gate of death and then into a new rebirth. And this is a classic idea, but this is like the thing that really matters. Like we can just while away our time here and not have it add up to much of anything, and we're no more advanced at the time of death than we were when we came here in the first place. Or we can do some really serious development work with our consciousness and energy and become more than we were before. And again, that gets preserved in these energy patterns in our field. That's like the one thing you take with you.
Yeah. So what's the consequence of not improving in this life so we can quickly hook more people to listen so that they understand how they can fix their energy field and make progress and improve the patterns of their life, or whatever those things are that you're gonna help us understand?
There are many consequences, but probably the most fundamental thing that'll drive it home for everybody is that if you do not use this lifetime for advancing your state, and you don't understand the patterns of life, then basically you're just going to be condemned to keep repeating the same mistakes, and you're going to repeat yourself to an endless cycle of suffering. So that's one of the main concepts in Buddhism, is how much unnecessary suffering are we exposing ourselves to by not striving for enlightenment, or not doing the basic work to be able to observe and control our mind, to observe and control and direct our feeling life, to observe and control our energy and our actions in the world, to control and direct our speech. So this is really a universal concept. But for the Buddhists, they talk about skillful action. Take skillful action, you'll develop yourself to a place where you have more pleasure, you have more freedom, you understand how things work, and you can make an educated decision. Or you can take unskillful action, just be in the reactive mind and react emotionally to everything around you in a way that's destructive and destroys relationships, destroys possibilities. And then you'll just stay on that cycle of suffering. So that's really the most fundamental part of it. But the other part of it is there's a deeper aspect of suffering beyond our usual day-to-day experience. And that is there's a type of subtle suffering that comes by not knowing who we are, by not remembering who we are, why we're here, what we chose to do in this incarnation, this larger spiritual context. It's often very subconscious in people, but it drives them to try to fill their lives with other things that just become destructive in the end.
Well, help us get off the wheel of karma.
I'll do what I can. I'm working to get off it myself, but yes.
I mean, well, is that, I mean, as an additional little question right now, is that innate within the human existence, is that we will never be able to fully see ourselves and remember our past and remember where we came from and who we are. And that is confined within this dimension as part of the human existence in our challenge of this reality. Is that part of this matrix?
This was understood in the ancient world in classical initiation as what was referred to as taking the draft of forgetfulness. This means that when you incarnate, you are made to forget who you are, where you're from, what this whole purpose is, your past incarnations, the whole thing.
We sure do.
This classic understanding of the draft of forgetfulness is the thing that we come in not remembering. Now, this is not true for people of certain levels of higher spiritual development. Because of the structures they've created in their subtle bodies, they can bring in the remembrance of who they are pretty much from the beginning. And these people can recognize the people around them in their lives from their connections with them in previous lives. And they maintain more of this knowledge, but that's based on certain structures you create in the subtle body. That takes work. It takes knowledge to create these. Yeah. Now, initiation, well, major part of it has always been to go through a remembering process. In the European Rosicrucian tradition, there's a great initiation saying, which is, in the beginning was the memory. That means the first thing that we have to do when we come back every time is to regain our karmic memory of who we are, because this is not our first rodeo. We've done this before. And so there's certain types of karmic exercises a person can do to start to remember who they are, where they come from, etc. And that gate is not as closed for some people as it is for others. And particularly, there's a lot of this going on now because there's been such a resurgence of what in the ancient world was particular types of plant medicine that were used in initiation processes, and is now coming back with the mass use of psychotropics, often related to the old plant medicine. And that can often help people regain their karmic memory through certain activations. Yeah. But the key thing here is to remember, again, who we are, why we're here, because otherwise, it's like we're in some movie where we're amnesic and we have to go through this whole process of where am I? What's happened? What's this whole thing about? But once we start to remember that, now we regain our purpose and we begin to remember who we've been and how that's led to here, and that this is itself only one bead in a chain leading to a particular destination for us to become a unique spiritual being in the world. It's what from the Greek word is called teleological destination. It's like we're being pulled toward what we're meant to become in the future. And all these interesting things happen to us, people we meet and experiences that we're given and things we didn't expect appearing in our lives, helping to pull us toward this. Mm-hmm. And so like again, in the old Rosicrucian initiation, this was referred to as reading the name inscribed on the stone. And this is where we begin to remember who we've been before. Now, there's a lot of challenges with this because it's very easy for this to fall into fantasy, where we're just projecting all types of things about, I'd like to be this, I'd like to be that. So if their first memories are something that's very elevated, like I was this fantastic, famous historical figure in the past, and I'm just drenched in glory, then often that should be questioned. Because when you actually start doing past life regression with people, it's very common that first thing they remember are traumatic experiences. Being a scullery maid in 13th century France where you were horribly abused, this type of thing. But the larger aspect of it is that there is a purpose to our series of incarnations. Now, again, going to the modern European Rosicrucian tradition, which I believe is a kind of transformation of the old Egyptian initiation, the Essene initiation, the Greek, the Holy Grail tradition in Europe, into a modern format. There's a whole aspect of this where human race has a esoteric name, just like the higher angelic beings have names that point to what their power, their function is. Mm-hmm. The name for the human race in the Rosicrucian tradition is that we are spirits of love and freedom.
If you like this clip and you want to hear the whole episode, click at the bottom of your screen.